Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grimflayer. Hope you're all doing very well today, and I am coming to you with a theory video for my Mono-Red Prowess fans out there. Our archetype has a problem, but it is a very good problem to have, so we are kind of kicking butt and taking names lately. We've got a lot of really good results. We were really well positioned before the bans, overall, and I think we're going to get even better after the bans. But here is our problem. Our problem is that the lists is that our lists are clearly not optimized, and specifically in one way. It's very, very obvious that they're not optimized. So MTG Goldfish has got this nifty feature where you can see the percentages. And right here, we've got the three core threats: Swift Spear, Soulscar Mage, and Bedlam Reveler. But 71% of the decks are playing 3 copies of Runaway Steam-Kin, 20% of the decks are playing 3 copies of Kiln Fiend, and the remaining 9% of decks, and again, Goldfish's numbers aren't perfect, but generally speaking, we have 3 schools of thought, that's the takeaway, are playing neither. They are playing no 2-mana threat. So, this is too much variation to just be like a local meta call or a preference call. I think there has to be a clear answer as to what is optimal between playing this card, Kiln Fiend, in your Mono-Red Prowess deck, playing this card, Runaway Steam-Kin, in your Mono-Red Prowess deck, or playing neither and playing no 2-mana threat for that matter. And I'm using Mishra's Bauble here to represent this, but the point is you would be playing full playsets of Bedlam Reveler and just playing a lot more non-creature spells to make up for that missing 2-drop threat. So what I'm here to do is to give you a little bit of analysis, to delve deep into some theory, and we talk about the pros and cons of Kiln Fiend versus Runaway Steam-Kin versus a build that eschews both in favor of other things. So we're going to do that, and we're also going to show you a little bit of gameplay footage highlighting the pros of the different options. So thank you so much to the Patreon supporters who do make this content possible. At the end of the video, I'm also going to show you my current list that I'm going to be playing when I start jamming leagues post-ban as well. Without further ado, let's dive right into it. Alright guys, we're going to start off talking about Kiln Fiend, and one thing I forgot to mention in the intro that's also very important is that not only do we obviously need to figure out what the optimal threat suite is, but also our different threat choices have different synergies with different spells. So our non-creature spell choices, for which there is also a lot of variance and a lot of room for flexibility, those choices flow from the choices of our threats. So that means that this is the crucial issue to solve. So anyway, let's solve it. We're talking about Kiln Fiend to begin with. Kiln Fiend is a card that I personally like. I've had a lot of success with it, and it is probably, under almost any normal circumstances, the very best racing card. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the best card, even though our deck generally wants to race people, because it is kind of doubling down on what we already do. You could argue that you're supposed to branch into different directions with the non-core threats, but if you want to be linear, if you want to race as hard as possible, Kiln Fiend is your guy. It has the highest upside in terms of raw power, so if you're able to connect with a Kiln Fiend, if you're able to avoid having it destroyed by some kind of removal or otherwise interacted with, Kiln Fiend is going to take you from take your opponent from 20 to 0 as quickly as anything we have access to. Kiln Fiend also has natural toughness too. Now don't get me wrong, it still dies to a stiff breeze. It is just kind of like an acceptable amount of resilience, and only that, barely acceptable. It is a real disaster to have a 2-mana X1 in our deck getting killed by something like Plague Engineer or Renin 6 or even opposing Lava Darts if we're in a mirror match. And worth pointing out that Runaway Steam-Kin, while it can get bigger, it does have toughness 1 naturally when deployed on curve. So Kiln Fiend has that little bit more resilience. That said, it also doesn't get any tougher. Only the power goes up. with Kiln Fiend, whereas Runaway Steam-Kin, if you maybe play it turn 3, or if your opponent doesn't have interaction that really punishes you, it does become more resilient over time. And you can even play tricks by way of enhancing its toughness at instant speed by casting a red spell. So Kiln Fiend has a higher floor but a lower ceiling in terms of how survivable it is, but basically it is our most linear, in some ways our most proactive, and our most single-handedly powerful. Like, if you just have like an average progression, Kiln Fiend takes the most chunks out of your opponent's life total during the course of that progression if he connects. So let's take a look at a little bit of gameplay involving Kiln Fiend to show you just what I'm talking about. Okay, my friends, so this is footage from a modern league that I have featured in a league on the channel, so if you saw my league number 4, I believe it was, you will already have seen this, so apologies for duplicating the content, but really this is just the best example of Kiln Fiend that you could really ask for, and the upsides of the card. So, where we're at is we are getting absolutely nut-drawn by a Crabvine opponent. We're always going to try to set up a turn 3 Kiln Fiend kill. Therefore, on turn 1, we deploy Swifty, we attack. Obviously, giving them the Stixure Supplier death trigger isn't good, but we figure we're setting up for a turn 3 kill. We want to clear out the blocker, we want them to... Right now, we don't have a crash through in hand, so we need to get rid of the blocker as soon as possible and try to set up lethal for turn 3. But we hope the opponent's progression isn't quite this nutty. Sadly for us, it is. Their board is incredibly wide. They've already hit us down to 13. It's only turn 3, and just look at the state of things, right? Look at the absolute state of affairs. On the other side, end step, they make another couple of blockers, and or one blocker, and they go wide with other things that cannot block this turn. So it's do or die for us, my friends. It is do or die. Can Kiln Fiend get us there? Well, let's find out. Kicking it off with a Monomorphose, that's a pretty good start. We draw Forked Bolt. This is my own personal spice. Most people do not play this, but right here it really shows its worth. Tagging with maximum efficiency their board, taking down 2 walkers and getting triggers for both of our creatures, 2 blockers rather, not walkers, and we're just continuing to go off. We double dart the crab, and we lava spike the opponent, and look at that, out of absolutely nowhere, we turn the corner, and Kiln Fiend is a 16-2, and the opponent is exceedingly dead. This was a nut draw. The only thing they really could have had that was even better, realistically, was a Creeping Chill or 2. But we faded that, and we had really no business stealing this Game 1. That Game 1 progression from Crabvine, especially on the play, beats 99% of random modern deck Game 1 progressions. Like, no question about it. But because we have the infinitely high ceiling of Kiln Fiend, and our deck otherwise complied, we didn't need a ton of mana to go off here. We just, yes, Monomorphose was very helpful, yes, Lava Dart was crucial, but these things are part of our normal progressions, and so just using like basically a strong but normal turn 3, we are able to radically turn the tide and steal Game 1 out from under the nose of Crabvine, and that is the power of the Kiln Fiend. And next up, we gotta look at Runaway Steam-Kin. A lot of the chatter is about how hot this card is right now, no pun intended, but some are also saying that this is a bit of a trap. Some people say that this is a feel-good card, which I can confirm it is, and that people tend to overrate it a little bit because it does feel so good to go off with it. Like, you think our normal deck progressions are feel-good, which they are, well, Steam-Kin does have a tendency to take that to the next level. No arguments here. I've also heard people say it's a grindy card, and before I tested it, I was like, I'm coming from the BGX midrange background. How does a 1-mana 2/2, or excuse me, much worse, a 2-mana 1/1 that doesn't provide card advantage, how is that, in what world is that a grindy card? So I wasn't really convinced by that argument, but, as I played with it, I do start to see where people are coming from. The other thing that people said that really caught my ear was, it's a card you really have to play with to really get. And I said, okay, well, I can respect that. You know, I like to defer to people with more experience as I'm learning a new archetype. So Runaway Steam-Kin, you know, it is one of those cards that when you really start going off with it, you're like, okay, I see what the hype is about. I really, really do. That said, I am not convinced that it is the very best way to go, simply because it does have some weaknesses. You, again, remember, we've got to remember the school of thought that says we shouldn't be playing any of the 2-drops. So there's that to contend with, but even if we are playing a 2-drop, this Toughness 1, it is a liability as a floor. I expect Lava Dart, Plague Engineer, and Renin 6 all to see more play in the post-ban modern meta. These are natural predators for Runaway Steam-Kin. They're going to be potential big blowouts that things like Kiln Fiend and even our 1-mana 1/2s are not as vulnerable to at all. So that's the floor. And then you've got to realize that, like, if you keep gassing out, like if you have a lot of gas in hand, that's when Steam-Kin is good, because you can keep making 3 mana basically for free. You can just really, really cheat on mana, and you can chain these incredible turns together. But what if you're not gassing out, right? Kin has kind of a low floor, because it doesn't give you the chance to shove all in like you do with Kiln Fiend and say, well, I'm not going to win if they get another turn, so let's just play everything and hope they don't have a removal spell. You know, the most you can make Steam-Kin in that scenario is a 4/4, which is fine, you know. In that sense, it does contribute to the beats, but again, it doesn't give you the all-in shoving power if you are low on gasoline in hand. However, it does have a lot of upsides, and it is nice that the counters can stay on it. Like, if that is one way in which it does grind well. Like, if you are just, it's kind of a close game, you're trading resources, you can leave Steam-Kin at a 3/3 or a 4/4 if that's the best play. So this card's very versatile, it's very interesting. Let's take a look at a couple scenarios in which it kind of shows how uniquely powerful it can be. Okay, my friends, scenario is it's game 1 against Ponza. They were on the draw. We've spent the early turns getting some damage across. You know, they are down to 9 and trading resources, but they have Muanvulid Acid Mossed us back down to 2 lands, and now we're afraid that they've got a 6-drop bomb, and sure enough, they do. It is their signature 6-drop bomb, in fact, Inferno Titan. So this is a real kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't situation if this is anything but a Steam-Kin, because you either cash in the Lava Dart at an inopportune time just to save it, and then you're trying to operate on 1 mana to beat an Inferno Titan. Probably not going to happen. Or you just let the 6/6 ETB and kill one of your 2 threats. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. But because of Steam-Kin's unique abilities here, it is actually viable to flashback the dart in order to put a counter on to save it, and we are not really mana screwed because we have the ability to just activate it for 3 mana to kick off our turn. Obviously hope we draw something good off the top, and to be fair, that's a very good draw, Monomorphos. Very good synergy with our entire deck, including Steam-Kin, and sometimes, guys, when you have it, you just have it. We Monomorphos into another Monomorphos, and then we get the land back for good measure. We can burst lightning upstairs and make even more mana. That's 5 floating mana off of Steam-Kin, plus both our lands are still untapped. The mana production really is nutty. So we end all of this beautiful, beautiful sequencing by just casting a Reveler and still having 4 mana to operate with. And then as soon as we cast a spell, we have 3 more mana on top of that. So opponent's just very dead. Might as well style on them a little bit with a crash through, but then we do just decide to put them out of their misery. We go upstairs with the burn, and that's that. But we had a couple more darts about to be in the bin. We had 3 more prowess triggers that hadn't resolved yet, so Swifty would be a 10-11. And Reveler, which granted can attack, would be an 8-9, but you can see the absolute nutty turns that Steam-Kin can put together, especially when you have a lot of gas in hand, but you are choked on mana. And here's another Steam-Kin scenario for you, my friends. The scenario here is that we are in the mirror match and we're on the draw. This is post-side and we've won game 1, so we're on the draw for game 2. And our hand's looking pretty solid. You know, you want to stick a threat. Opponent's got the sideboard hate, though. They've got the turn 1 Dragon's Claw, so we've just got to kind of go wide which is a way to try to beat Dragon's Claw, but we've got to dig for answers. We've got to dig for an Abrade, but they found another Dragon's Claw, which is just insane. So we continue going wide. Now the Steam-Kin is involved, and we keep cantripping. We're starting to have more productive attacks this way, but obviously Dragon's Claw is doing a lot of work against us. And we still don't have Abrades, and the opponent has the third claw, which is just completely insane. You really don't even want to see one of them, of course, in the mirror, much less three. Now, granted, this would be a lot worse if they had had turn 1 removal, which they didn't, but still, we've got a lot of work to do. So let's see if Runaway Steam-Kin can help us get there. So they gain life when we burst lightning upstairs, at least for now. And same applies even more so to Lava Dart, but we are getting a lot of counters on our stuff, and more importantly, we are emptying out our hand, casting Reveler, and note that we did have the Steam-Kin mana involved here, and that was actually very, very important, because Steam-Kin's mana there allows us to not only, it contributes to the beats again as a 4/4, but also allows us to get all the way to Reveler mana, and dump out Reveler, and dump out Soulscar Mage, and again, going as wide as possible while still having gas in hand is how you beat these Dragon's Claws, or even maybe if you don't have gas in hand, because, if they can't handle your vanilla beats, then they're going to lose to that too. Now, granted, opponent's progression was far from perfect here despite the triple hate card. Saheeli here is not very good without anything to back her up, and then we find Abrade, so we've pretty much got him here, I think. We go Swifty into Crash Through, into Abrade. We've got 3 more mana, which means we get to just Lava Dart and light up the stage to our heart's content, all on the back of Runaway Steam-Kin. We get to freely cash in Fiery Islet, which is another card that has a really good synergy with Steam-Kin, just to make sure the gas never stops coming. And it wasn't. We had another Abrade, we had another Burst Lightning. And again, Burst Lightning, another card that it has the mana sink, the kicker ability, very synergistic with the Steam-Kin. So in a way, the deck can kind of manufacture its own gas if it's built around Steam-Kin sufficiently. But guys, look how much damage we're doing this turn. It's so insane. Look how badly we are overkilling the triple Dragon's Claw progression. Now, again, granted, they didn't have removal, they didn't have a good 3-drop here when they hit the third land, but still, just as a way of demonstrating the ceiling of Steam-Kin and the efficacy of the card when you're gassing out and you need to just keep producing mana to have really nutty turns, that's what the Steam-Kin does, and that's why a lot of people are very high on it right now. Okay, so there's the case for Steam-Kin and for Kiln Fiend, but I would be very remiss if I did not bring this third school of thought to the table. This is the school of thought that's been vocalized recently by Ryan Overturf, creator of the deck, Star City Games commentator. He's on Twitch at Ryan Overdrive. I recommend that everybody who's interested in prowess does watch his content. I think he's a very intelligent player, and he is pretty adamant. I don't want to put words in his mouth, so I'm paraphrasing again. You check out his stuff firsthand. But I did catch a little bit of his commentary at SCG last weekend, where he was kind of poo-pooing the idea of Runaway Steam-Kin, and then in his post-ban talk on Twitch, he said that Kiln Fiend has some impressive draws, has some power to it, but he thinks it makes you weaker to the field at large. He thinks it makes you a lot more vulnerable to just getting 1-for-1'd by decks trying to trade with you. And so even though it's a good tool to race, he doesn't think it's as good as just playing the full 4 Bedlam Reveler and a lot of other cards like Mishra's Bauble to churn through the deck even faster. And as for Runaway Steam-Kin, Ryan, and presumably the other people who don't play it and who don't play any 2-drop, they just don't think it's very good at all. Ryan seems to think Steam-Kin is basically horrid, and, there is a real decision to be made here. Again, how can we consider ourselves an optimized archetype when you have roughly 1/3 of people, maybe a little bit less, saying that we should be playing no 2-drops, And then among the people who play 2-drops, some of them like Runaway Steam-Kin, and some of them like Kiln Fiend. These are very different cards that all serve the broader purpose, but in very different ways. And like I said, the non-creature spell choices do depend to a significant degree on what threats you're playing if you want the synergies to be optimal. So to that end, let's take a look at a few sample lists, including all 3 schools of thought. Okay, so first off, let's take a look at what I consider to be a well-designed Kiln Fiend list. So you usually see 2 to 3 Kiln Fiend and 3 to 4 Bedlam Reveler for roughly 14 creatures when you're on a 2-drop in general. It's my family going crazy upstairs. My wife's chasing the kids around. I don't know if you can hear that, but if you hear screaming in the background, that's what that is. Anyway. So with Kiln Fiend, you have certain incentives, and one of your major incentives is to play a lot of cantrips, but notably ones that are not Mishra's Bauble, because again, with Kiln Fiend, you want to shove all in, and it is not triggered by artifacts. It doesn't have prowess, it needs instants and sorcery, so you don't want to play Bauble with Kiln Fiend, but you do want to play as many cantrips as possible, and you also want to clear the board as well as possible, so 2 Warlord's Fury and 2 Wild Slash, that's a good split to do both. You're basically playing 6 Crash Throughs, and this is the shock variant that the pilot seems to think has the best chance of clearing out problematic blockers. So otherwise, it's a pretty stock main deck, and that makes a lot of sense, and that's basically how you want to construct your Kiln Fiend prowess deck, so you understand how the decision about which threats are optimal, what the threat suite that's optimized looks like, is very important in its own right, and also very important for constructing a optimal deck around it. And next up, we look at a pretty stock, pretty well-designed, in my view, Runaway Steam-Kin prowess list. Again, 14 to 15 creatures becoming the norm. This one has the full 4 Bedlam Reveler, but 3 is as common. But the important build-arounds with Steam-Kin are as follows. Number 1, you want your shock variant to be Burst Lightning if you're building around Steam-Kin. Simply, for 2 reasons. Number 1, because you do produce that excess of mana, so it's a lot more realistic to actually reach that kicker cost on a regular basis. Number 2, with respect to Steam-Kin's power and toughness, you can play instant speed tricks, so you want it to be an instant as opposed to a sorcery like Firebolt or Forked Bolt. And I guess number 3, if we do consider Steam-Kin to be kind of a grindier option, maybe the games in general go a little bit longer than they do with Kiln Fiend, so again, that's more reason that the kicker cost is good. The other thing that people do that I disagree with, but I think it's good deck building, but I think it's still wrong, if that makes sense, is Lava Dart. Shaving a Lava Dart. I think this card is just nuts. I think you just want the full 4 under any circumstances in your main deck, but if you are planning on developing your mana to a significantly higher than usual extent on the back of Steam-Kin, then yes, Lava Dart represents the least mana efficient damage. Like, you're cashing in a land, you can kind of do that when you're shoving all in whether or not you have an excess of mana, and therefore maybe you want to play stuff like more Burst Lightnings with a higher damage ceiling in their own right in a vacuum. So I get that, I understand why that is, I think that's synergistic deck building, but I kind of think it's still just wrong because Lava Dart is just one of the very, very best cards in our deck. So I don't recommend that you do that personally, but I see why people do. Finally, Bone Crusher Giant is a popular sideboard card lately, and I think it might get a little less popular with the bans taking effect. But maybe not, maybe it's just that good, but either way it seems to be especially synergistic with Steam-Kin, because Bone Crusher Giant is a nice value play, but it is very mana-hungry overall, with 5 total mana invested to get both halves of the card, so Steam-Kin can obviously facilitate that nicely, and if you're playing Steam-Kin, it's because you think like these mid-rangey style beats in a supporting role for our main prowess plan, like Steam-Kin beating as a 3/3 or a 4/4 is good, well then Bone Crusher Giant's 4/3 Punisher body is also going to be well positioned, kind of by definition, right? So that's the idea behind a Runaway Steam-Kin build, and let's talk about the builds without either. Okay, guys, so here's the most recent example of a list without, with Mishra's Bauble, and also without either Kiln Fiend or Runaway Steam-Kin on MTG Top 8, so you definitely have to play the full 4 Bedlam Reveler. I think there are a lot of good reasons to only play 3, it's very clunky in multiples in general, but if you're not on any 2-drops, you kind of owe it to yourself to just jam the full 4 and let that awkwardness happen to you from time to time, because 11 creatures is not enough in my view. But if you are on the 4 Bedlam Reveler, you are incentivized to play lots and lots of cantrips so you can fill up the graveyard quickly and so you can dig to them. And this list is a great example of it, not only for Crash through the full 4 playset of Warlord's Fury and the full playset of Mishra's Bauble. So even though Bauble does not directly fuel Reveler, it just gets you a free look at another card, so in an indirect way it does. And either way, you are just digging radically toward not only Bedlam Revelers, but also toward more copies of our other core threats of Swifty and Soulscar Mage, because again, we're just seeing so many cards so efficiently that we will hit our lower threat count more often, so we have effective threat density that is as high maybe as like a 14 creature deck with fewer cantrips. I haven't done the math on that, but you understand the point. Finally, you don't need to play Burst Lightning in this deck with Bedlam Revelers. You are more, unlike with Steam-Kin, you are able to opt more easily into the sorceries. This pilot has opted for Firebolt, which I like. Anything with an old border I automatically like, and this is an awesome Odyssey printing, but it is, to me, just a tad non-bowy in a very oblique way. The flashback with the Bedlam Reveler, a tiny non-bow, maybe one that's still worth it. It does grind very well. It's a nice card. Again, I personally play Forked Bolt, but I'm in the minority, and Firebolt, totally legit. For that matter, any of the shocks that we've seen, Burst Lightning, Wild Slash, Firebolt, Forked Bolt, and all in my view totally legit, but you should know why you're playing the one you're playing. And the final thing I'll point out here is that this pilot has Kiln Fiend as an entire playset in the sideboard. Now, that's not very usual, but it's just worth pointing out, since we're talking all about these threats, that Kiln Fiend can actually be a legitimate sideboard card if you want to bring it in to race the opponent. Presumably they side out some or maybe even all Bedlam Revelers when they want to shove all in and go full race mode. So I guess that's another use for Kiln Fiend if that's what you're into. Alright, my friends, I would like to close out this video by showing you my list that I think this is what I'm going to register next time I play a league. This will be my first time playing Prowess post-ban. I'm very excited about it. And kind of contra what I've been saying this entire league, my list is a little bit in between kind of the Kiln Fiend lists that we have seen and the Bedlam Reveler no 2-drop lists that we have seen. And for me, it's literally just a case of don't fix what ain't broke, because I'm 80% win rate in leagues, despite being pretty new to the deck over the last 2 months. Admittedly, not a huge sample size. I believe that's 6 leagues, but still completely nuts. I just keep going 4-1 every single time I bring the deck out. So I have just made a couple changes, but as you can see, I'm kind of halfway nodding to the presence of Kiln Fiend with Warlord's Fury ×2. As I mentioned, every time I've made a video about this, so I won't belabor the point as to why, I play Forked Bolt over alternatives, and I am on a 13 creature count with 8 of the untouchable 1-drops, 3 Reveler, and 2 copies of Kiln Fiend. This has worked really well for me. We're going to basically keep iterating with it while thinking about the theories that I've presented today and seeing how the meta shapes. But so the main deck, I believe, is completely unchanged from the last time I played on this channel, and the sideboard is just got a couple changes. I really do think the 3rd Blood Moon is going to be sweet. If you want to diversify, you could consider a Molten Rain, but that might be a little less effective on the whole, or an Alpine Moon, which is fine, but also makes us even more vulnerable to Blast Zone and Engineered Explosives, so I have just decided to try to play all 3 Blood Moons, see how it goes, and I'm kind of interested in killing a lot of small creatures, I think, and even not so small ones. The mid-sized X3s die to this too, of course, so I love Abrade. I think it's very strong. We're going to have the ability to keep the artifact decks down, because I think they're down but not out, right? So we like the abrades. 3 Dragon's Claw, I expect Burn to rise up. We want 3 of these, maybe even a 4th. And the 1 of Shrine has served me very well. I like splitting more toward Tormod's Crypt than Surgical. I have found this to be better. All the graveyard decks care about clearing out their entire graveyard rather than answering 1 payoff most of the time. So even though, and I like them both because they're both proactive, they both give you a prowess trigger. I like these better than Leyline of the Void right now. And Dismember is always a staple of the archetype. It's kind of one you can't leave home without in most metas. So there you go, guys. That's what my list looks like. I hope the theory breakdown was interesting for you and helpful for you. As you may know, I do this a lot with the mid-range stuff. My mid-range fans love it. It always engenders great discussion. It helps us really assess cards and assess meta as well. I hope this was the case for you, but you know that I'm always willing and ready to learn from you as well. I hope this generates great discussion in the comments and elsewhere, and let's figure out what the ceiling of our archetype is, guys, because I think we are so strong in Modern in general, and also very well positioned post-ban. So thank you so much for watching. If you are enjoying this content, I would love to play more Prowess for you, but right now, all of my financial support, as far as I know, comes from mid-range players, and also the views on mid-range videos are way better. So I can only dedicate so much time realistically to Prowess compared to the mid-range stuff, but if I can get some more views on these, if I can maybe even get some more support from some of the red mages out there, Patreon link is in the description below. The more support I get, the better my metrics are, the more Prowess I can play for you, and I would love nothing more because this deck is sweet. So please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. You know, word of mouth helps me grow as well, and let me know what you think about everything I said here today. Good luck in your matches, guys, and stay tuned to the channel. I will see you soon.